Recorded this. Okay, so now I'm going to go share screen. If I can figure this out. Tell me when you see something.
Oh, I see it now. I see your screen. Yeah.
You see the whole screen?
I see I see a third screen. Yeah, okay. So my screen just switched, and now I see your screen in a separate window here, and you. So I've got both you and the screen.
But
and now I see the chart. Let me move this. I love it. I love technology. Here we go. So now I'm going to open this full screen on my big TV. Here we go. All right, perfect.
okay, so we're going to look at your chart and my chart heliocentrically. First of all, your Mars is right on my sun, within a degree, heliocentrically. Now we're going to take a look at, so the thing to notice that in looking at whole chart patterns are patterns like I've linked together here. Here you see what are called a basket and a wedge. But what you don't see, and that it's important to look for, is there any opposition with a square to it, like a T-cross or grand cross? Single squares, like I'm pointing out here, don't do it. It has to be something that the whole system is going through. And so the thing to take away is that you don't have a square. So that immediately tells me that you are not someone that's going to be as social at the center of a group as you are going to be someone that's more mental, using the mind to grasp stuff. More at the outskirts, not exactly a wallflower, but somebody who analyzes instead of just effuses emotive stuff. Now, if you had a T-cross, then we would expect a lot more. You find them a lot in actors and people who are in the public. So this is not so public, and I'm the same way. I mean, I'm going to show you.
Okay.
If I can get to it.
I have to force myself to public speak, but I do it.
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't like lectures. I like discussions with groups. Anyway, here's my helio chart. You can see that I don't have a T-cross or anything. What I have is a grand trine made up of 6 planets that's extremely exact. I mean, relatively comparably.
Wow, yeah.
So, but that tells us that tells me is that you and I are both more inward oriented, more using the mind to analyze and to grasp things, but also more sensitive to matter, to anything physical. And also another way of saying it is depending on our wits, not on our magnetic, socialness to make a living and to survive and stuff like that. So let me go back to yours for a second.
That's the truth.
Anyway, so what happened to me was, hang on. And you can also look at your geochart. We see something similar. There's not a lot of patterns there. Although there's more equals. One of the most important things that I discovered for myself about heliocentrics is that the space between planets, that if you could take the planets and evenly space the planets so that they were balanced, there was 40 degrees or whatever between every planet, that turned out to mean something that's very, very well balanced. So you show some balance there, but if I go back to your other chart, not so much. There's a big area here. Wherever there's an empty area, I used to say when I taught astrology to people, we become what we want, what we lack, and the empty spaces we try to fill in because we want to be whole, and it's hard to do. So, anyway, what's my point? My point is to say that over years, I call these originally star types, archetypes. And I identified like 60 of them that I use regularly, but only 2 basic types, either the easy aspects, the soft aspects, that what I call green lines, just because my wife and I talk that way, and red lines are squares or oppositions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So what's my point? My point is that I did about 9 years of counseling, and I ended up mostly just using the heliochart, never even getting to the geochart because it wasn't necessary, because the heliocentric. See, remember that our geochart is just a view of the solar system from Earth, right?
Yeah.
Of course, it's important. And people say, well, we don't live on the sun. Of course not, but we live because of the sun. And I don't know whether you've read Landscheid at all. Have you read Landscheid stuff?
Some, yeah, a little bit. I think you turned me on to that. You mentioned it before, and I did pick up on some of that.
Well, his book, Cosmic Cybernetics, first of all, I've met a lot of astrologers, and I like astrologers, and I love astrology. But when I say, who did you really learn from? Well, I read all of Rudyard. I met Rudyard, talked with Rudyard, all these people that I benefit from. But the person I learned the most from was Landscheid, just because he was years and years ahead. What he called cosmic cybernetics, the idea that organisms of any size, especially large-scale organisms like galaxy, in order to cohere, to remain coherent, they have to have a flow of information. There has to be some flow of information, just like in any cell or our body or whatever. There has to be some kind of cybernetic quality that's keeping the thing updated so it doesn't just fall apart. And he pointed that out, but I didn't. And, he came to my home and we knew each other. And in 1978, I sent him his first computer, just when computers came out, because he didn't have one or any access to one. He did a lot of his climate research on that. And his books do a lot of annotating, of showing the sources where he draws stuff, but not much interpretation, not much of what he actually felt and thought, although he does some. And did I send you the book that I had Robert Schmidt translate for me called Children of the Light? I can't remember.
No, I don't think you sent that.
Well,
I recall.
Well, I can, if you're interested. Children of the Light is a book that that Landscheid did, but it was never translated to English. And so for a couple of years, Robert Schmidt was at our center, and we didn't quite know what to do with him. But well, then he's brilliant. We had she's one of my closest friends ever. But one thing he did do is translate that book into English, because it has to do with solar activity, solar flares, and the idea that great inventions and great creative moments occur based on the intensity of the sun. And that's something that modern astrologers are paying zero attention to, which is so stupid, because it's right in their face and they're getting a tan from it. And anyway, we can talk about that. What I was trying to say is that these patterns are just very, very interesting. I mean, in your case, it shows a dependence on mental activity, just because of all those green lines, the basket especially is. It's almost like
probably an over dependence.
Well, no choice. No choice.
Yeah, no choice. It's an over dependence. Thank goodness I have them, because
Right. So anyway, I don't want to just go on and on about it. We're just getting to know each other. So so I have no idea what you do. Maybe I'll stop sharing here.
Well, no, you can stop sharing. But no, I'm fascinated by your approach there. But something that I picked up on what I focus on a lot is the structure, the energetic scaffold of the universe. I look at not the planetary node, where a planet is, the energy or the matter of a planet, but the energy around it and how it is created. And then of course the sun being everything to me is a giant Merkaba inside of a Merkaba, you know, a double trine spinning energy fields down to the atomic level. So I break it down, I break astrology down to the atom, all the way to, well, really what we're dealing with the sun effect. You've put more focus on heliocentric chart, which I find very important. And you're right. I think most astrologers miss that fact that that the Earth is inside a larger field, which is the solar field, affecting everything. I don't know how to best describe that. I wrote an article recently describing, or I say about 2 years ago, describing the structure of atoms, the structure of cells, the structure of the astrological chart, and of course the structure of the solar system. So it's this theme of scalar structures that I see that you are kind of honed in on as well. Like everything is, and the fact that I learned, I have to say it, I learned a lot of this from you, because I ran across 20 something years ago, 25, I don't know, whenever you did the multiple lists of, what do you call that? The
interface.
Sorry, I'm
points.
having a
interface.
Yes,
points.
interface points. Yeah, when I ran across a lot of this information, I was like, it just made sense to me that this is this is a missing piece for most astrologers, because they're really focused on they're focused on the mundane, and I'm not. I don't even do readings anymore. I don't do counseling sessions anymore. I have occasional relationship sessions. I have a little 7th house, and I get called on to do that. But most of my stuff that I work on is research, all research.
I mean, it's the same stuff. Either you know, so it's like meditation. It's everything's meditation. So,
yeah.
I mean, I still do family stuff. People, but anyone that contacts me, I do something for them, no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah. I turn over my general stuff to my partner. So my partner is also an astrologer, and she's better with people's needs as far as you know, just relationship issues, or, you know, getting a job, or, you know, the basic stuff that people come to you for a chart, what's going on in their life. I guess because of my mental, what you're showed there a minute ago, the constant focus on mental acuity, yes. I can't drop down too long and connect to that emotional level. Even as a Cancer, I don't do it as easily as most people do. So
what's your birthday? Oh, looking at it, right? Oh, 28. Yeah. So it's almost
28th. Yeah.
Well,
yeah. Well,
very end of it.
Yeah.
So you understood the concept of the interface points, basically not just looking at what affects Earth, but how do all the planetary orbits affect one another? And
exactly.
So they have nodes, but they also have what we would call square points, places that where the farthest away we're going to get from cooperating. So things are in alignment. So I've written what I wrote a pretty good paper called Cycle Centers and Circulation, something like that. I don't remember exactly. But what it was about is that one of the things that astrologers have paid no attention to, just like you said, we pay like that old thing, as above, so below. That's what you just sketched out by the different kinds of things. But I'm saying that there used to be another byline that said, but after another manner. And to me, that manner was the inclinations. Different coordinate systems are differently inclined. And our inclinations, what we feel like doing, what we're able to see, and certainly if you get into Dharma or stuff like that, the view becomes absolutely key. If you don't have the proper perspective, you're not going to see anything. And so that, so you started to get into it, but give me some of the facts that I got the idea of like Matryoshka dolls or whatever called nested sets, but how do you deal with, what are the, what do I want to say? I want to say that astrology to me is 100% based on astronomy. And that symbolic astrology is a language I can speak as well as anyone, but I would never speak it to myself, just because it's wonderful, but it's a dream. But astronomy is not a dream. I mean, it's all a dream, maybe, but
yeah.
but so you get the idea. Astrology is cultural astronomy. That's how I see it.
Right, right.
So what did you use?
I was just thought I'd take a. Go ahead. I was going to take a second and just.
Yeah.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No,
yeah.
no.
Well,
I'm trying to get to the factual things. How do you connect? You said you get into that. Maybe you looked at interface points. What are the astronomical facts that you depend on? That's what I'm trying to ask.
Astronomical facts I depend
Well, I mean,
on.
just astronomy of it. Or do you not? Or
yeah, I don't. You know, I love what you just said about I would never speak the symbolic language of astrology to myself, because I only think in mathematical terms, but I see it as spiritual mathematics. Like there's no separation. I have
I'm with you.
I studied multiple cultures. Yeah, so I lived briefly in Tibet. I've studied the Dharma. I've studied.
Where in Tibet?
I lived in Lhasa, and then I stayed in Samye, outside of the first monastery.
I've been to both. I've been to Samye.
Oh, you've been to both? Wow.
I've been to Chimbuk, and climbed to the cave.
Yeah.
And I've been to Tibet a number of times.
Yeah.
So
I've only been once, but I spend a lot of time there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what can I say? If you're into Dharma, then that's my whole life at this point.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time with that, and it's become just a natural part of my language. So it's just an everyday use of talking about the terms of Dharma and the karma. One of my focuses more recently has gone back to my Christian and religious upbringing, and I studied the Torah. So I've been deciphering the Bible and the Torah as astrological works. That's been my focus for the last probably 4 or 5 months, I guess. But I've done that. I've written many articles over the last few years that the first 5 books of the Bible are mathematical. If you know how to use the gematria and break it all down, and it describes the ether, and the first 5 books of the Bible are the ether and the 4 elements. People don't understand that. It's so deeply subtexted, and it explains all of the ages in the precession of the equinox is described astronomically. If you know how to read the works, the Egyptians, the Babylonians, they all knew this as spiritual mathematics. And that's where I come from, that everything that they learned, we wouldn't know any of this if they hadn't learned it first, basically, absorbed it first, assimilated it and brought it down to earth first, embedded it into their sacred texts, their religions. We wouldn't have any of this information now. We would be so lost. But because of that, that's how I view it, that we are all astronomical priests in a sense, you know. Okay. So it doesn't matter what culture you come from. So.
Regardless of whether it's recorded in a book, it exists. So that we do have another entrance to it, which is just experience. We can go in and experience that.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
I mean, that's
I think I had to use my exactly. That's a good point. I use my mind a lot, like you said, but I've learned to get past that to a point where I can just experience the isness. And that's why I don't question my belief anymore about any of this. It's just a knowing, and I'm just not trying to be arrogant or anything. It's just
well, that's
simple.
Dharma is the same thing, right? All about
exactly.
Experience.
Yeah, and so is the Torah and the Christian faiths and the Egyptian religion. You know, so they all understood the same thing. That's what I find fascinating. And the Dharma, Buddhism is one of the more recent incarnations of this. You know, you go back further into history, you find that the pure, I don't want to say pure, but if you know how to read the symbols mathematically, everything that you're describing about the structure of this, that the earth, the sun and the earth field together make all these things happen. We can't just say, that's why I find fascinating about your heliocentric approach. And I've only dabbled a little bit in that, but I think the sun's field is going to make a huge difference as we move into Pluto, as we move into the next stage, as we move into the Aquarian cycle, that it's going to, there's something that occurs as we move through a larger space field, the galactic field. You've written about the galactic center. I think I have a paper that you wrote something about that.
I did.
So as we move it,
and super
yeah. So once you've super galactic, again, once we cross these pathways, these are the cycles of the ages, really. in even a larger structure. Once we enter this new phase, the solar field enhances, which will enhance all the planetary fields. So it's like, it's just, I see it like we are passing through this age of Pisces at the lowest density, coming out into the age of Aquarius, which is going to revive the density of the solar field, which is going to charge the planetary energies down to the molecules, down to the particles. And we're going to be able to know the Dharma, see the light without having to think about it so much. It's just, we're lost in an emotional Piscean, using, the symbolic language, we're lost in emotions of Pisces.
But I have to say this, that at least according to Dharma, either the Galupa or the Kaju or the Nyingma, we're entering a darker age, not a lighter age.
You think we're entering?
I'm just saying.
No, okay,
I don't think the Pith texts
the Pith
talk about this current time of what they call Vajrayana Dharma is going to pass. It's going to be very difficult to find again. So if you're saying what you're saying, then you have to have something that's going to replace that is going to jibe with that. Otherwise, I have to try to understand it.
Well, yeah, let me ask you a quick question about that, because it's been a primary focus on that. I do believe what you said is true. We are going to enter a darker period first, but I don't think it's the extension of the entire age. I think it's a portion of the cycle of the approximately 2,000 years. Does the Pith say anything about that? Is it about the length of this period? Is it a sub-eon, or is it a? No,
they just talk in terms of kalpas, and and each one of those is so long that you and I couldn't even make the number of zeros necessary.
Oh, okay, they're speaking in terms of kalpas. Okay.
Or whatever, or eons is fine. Same thing. So.
Yeah. Well, I think you are correct about that.
Well, I mean, I spent a long time learning the Dharma, and it was the hardest thing I ever have done, and I'm still just learning it. And so I did, but what I had to do finally, first of all, I started in the late 1950s with Zen. And Zen for me then was something to stay up late at night, smoke cigarettes, make instant coffee with creamer, and talk about. And it was,
sounds a bit Alan Watts like.
But well, I saw him alive, and I knew him. And
oh wow!
In the early 70s, 1974, I was a chauffeur for Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, and I got to know him. And he taught me to meditate and stuff like that. But then it took me some years later. I never got out of high school, for example. I'm very hard to teach. If the person trying to teach me, if I don't think they have life savvy or knowledge, I can't learn from them. And I didn't. I just paid zero attention.
I quit college 3 times and I never went back. So I tried, but I understand. If they were, I had to teach the teachers. It wasn't working. I get it.
No, I didn't get out of high school, but the University of Michigan still accepted me, just because guess I was bright. But I only went for 3 weeks, and I was bright enough to say this is just the same old shit in another, more sophisticated place. So I left and went, hitchhiked out. I became a musician for many years and stuff like that. So, but what I was trying to get to was after quite a long time, I met the teacher that I worked with, for a Tibetan teacher who spoke no English. I had to learn to read Tibetan, but I never got very good at it. But I was with him for 36 years. He died in 2019 at 96. Anyway, the point is that because I got along so well with him, I was able to learn from him. And I was also able to do all of the things that you have to do, which are quite tedious. 100,000 of this, 100,000 of that. I did all of that. And then the only thing my teacher said is do it again. So I did it again. But I also spent 31 years going to his monastery every year for a 10-day teaching on Mahamudra. So I had extensive training, and I went to Tibet with him. Expensive training and actually doing all the stuff you have to do to learn a given lineage. And I'm still,
Mm.
I'm just miserable compared to someone, but but I did put in the work. And my only point is that became more interesting to me than astrology. Or here's the way that my teacher told me about astrology, like this, because they all use astrology, but they don't know much about how it works. They're called Sipas. When I went to see His Holiness the Karmapa, you'll like this. He gave me a name. He says, "You're Tanzanima," which means holder of the sun, right? So obviously,
perfect for you.
No, perfect for me.
Yeah.
And so I was like, we got a phone call. I'm just not going to take it. Anyway, what I'm mostly concerned about in these years is just about, practicing Dharma. Actually, and I practice Dharma meditation in all of what are called the preliminaries. I don't know how much you know about it, but basically there's the common preliminaries, there's the extraordinary preliminaries, and there's the special preliminaries. And I did all of that and some of it twice, as I mentioned. And so that these last years, all I'm doing is Mahamudra practice. You don't really practice it. Now this just brings us back to talking about experience as opposed to thought and conceptualization. That you and I both would be pretty good at conceptualization because of all the green lines in the chart. I said all of the easy aspects and none of the hard ones, really hard, like a T cross or a Grand Cross. So for us, especially for you and especially for me, without experience, without that feeling stuff, we're not, this is just my opinion. This is not a reflection on you. It just goes for me. We're not going to get anywhere because we don't know what we're talking about unless we can, as you say, as you maybe get into the Kabbalah or whatever, you're going to get down to the level of actually experiencing, going and doing the practices, going and doing the meditations, going and actually physically exercising the mind, not just skimming the cream from the top intellectually, right?
Right.
So one of the lessons that was the hardest for me to learn is that the mind isn't something just to think. That in order to realize the nature of the mind, you have to go and use it. You have to go and it's like a physical exercise, but it's using the mind. You have to actually go and search in it. You have to go, or the way we say it in our tradition is we have to become familiar with how the mind actually works. Anyway, go back to what you're saying. I want to know more about, I like what you're saying. I'm still waiting for you to get to the experience part. Not just the intellectual part, but how do you go? How do you ground this? We have what's called ground, path, and fruition, right?
Yeah. How do I ground this?
How do you ground this?
Well, I have a hard time grounding it for myself, obviously, and I'm working on that still because I keep it up intellectual all the time, and that's my comfort zone. But I have this, I think I don't want to say new because I've been on it a long time. I think that it's becoming more important to me to translate this in a spiritual context. My focus, likely, like I said, has been the Torah. And I've been taking on learning Hebrew, reading it, chanting it, saying it, feeling the spiritual experience that a rabbi would have. But also the knowing that it is a metaphysical work. It's not just the surface events read there. It is a metaphysical work, and knowing that, I think, enhances the spiritual connection that I'm able to have. Unfortunately, I don't make it as ritualistic as I should. I don't make it as religious as I should, and I think that has been something my partner and I have been focused on recently. We've met a lot of people in the area. I've been studying the Bible and Torah for years, like I said, and we've met a number of people in our area who are Jewish, and they are encouraging us. And I feel inclined, naturally inclined, with my connection to the divinity, to be open to having those experience of what those, why the lunar. Okay, like I'm about to go in and do Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and I'm going to do the proper diet, and I'm going to do everything for that. I did it last year, and I had an amazing experience where I had a God connection. I could sit there and talk to heaven and ask questions, and it said, am I asking the right thing of God? Yes. And it says, you need to do this religiously. You need to do this next year. You need to do this weekly and monthly, daily, whatever. You need to enhance your practice. And on that part is the experience I feel like I'm being pushed towards, to make sure you don't just leave it up here. You have to put it in here,
No, that's, now you're talking, right? Now you're talking my
Yeah,
language,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless you ground it, it's just like the trail of a bird in the sky. It's just not.
Yeah.
It's not there if you're not.
And I've been that bird in the sky like that for a long time. I'm guilty of that. I know that.
No, but I can sense by talking to you that you have a certainty that you've earned. That certainty is very powerful, and I think it's leading you just the way you said is very beautiful. And I think that's exactly what happened to me with Dharma, only that instead of the Torah, I'm using the Pith teachings, the Upadesha. But I did all of the stuff like you're doing it. All of our practice was in Tibetan. So, and I did 100,000 of these, and 100,000 of those, and 100,000 of those, and 100,000 of those, again, all over again. So maybe you could just say, we're paying our dues. We're going to go beyond the conceptual realm and actually ground it in reality, the reality of experience. And I think that's very beautiful. First of all, it's very necessary. And so, I like hearing that. That makes sense.
Well, thank you.
It makes sense to me. That's why. Without that,
you get it.
Yeah, I do get it. And I'm doing the same thing. I'm going more and more into what's called Mahamudra or Dzogchen, Mahaati.
Yeah, Mahamudra.
Which is, it's also called non-meditation. It doesn't require.
Okay, yeah.
You spend many, many years making effort only to find that the next step is you have to withdraw. You have to undo the damage that you did making the effort.
Yeah,
so
I can see that.
That's when we get into what are called the non-dual practices, like Mahamudra or Dzogchen, where it's a total process of immersion in the moment. Are you familiar with Tilopa's words of advice? You know that Tilopa Mahasiddha?
I don't think so.
Tilopa, he's one of the leaders of progenitors or whatever of Mahamudra. Basically, he had what is called his words of advice. There are only a couple of lines. I'll say them to you just because they're extremely brilliant and they're also true. He says, first thing he says is don't prolong the past. And the second thing he says, don't invite the future. Then he says, whatever you do, don't alter the present. And the last thing is just relax as it is.
Yeah.
So that's the what I call the Pith teachings from, I think he was from a teaching called the Ganges Mahamudra. But anyways, the idea of the present moment is the only place there is to retire to, or to get to, or to rest in, and you can't make an effort to do it because the effort will cloud.
Yeah.
So it seems to me, just from talking to you without knowing all the chapter and verse, that you're going the same route, but just with another religion.
Yeah, pretty
Things like
much.
it.
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
think that,
I love what you just said about the first three portions of that this morning. I woke up to about not prolonging the past, not
right.
inviting the future. And then the fourth part I did not have in my mind, but the first three sections, I woke up nearly identical to what you just said. I woke
Well,
up to that this morning.
but the third one, you
In my
said the
head.
first three sections. The third one is the one about not altering the present. That's a really tough
Not
one.
altering the present, right?
Not
Yeah,
altering the
yeah,
present, but because you can't do it, and you can't alter anything. We can't. One
right.
can't. All we can do and we can't even rest the mind. The mind is
Yeah,
already at rest. All we can do is allow ourselves to rest in the mind itself. And
yeah,
that also is something that's very difficult to learn. But so, I mean, whatever astrology we talk, this is the most important part, because
exactly.
and also I have to say, and and I don't mean to just flatter you, but I haven't met another astrologer that's doing what you're doing.
Well, thank
No,
you.
no, it's actually going to go and get the proof of the pudding by giving their life to it.
Yeah,
So, I mean, there's other people, I could name them, but it would just seem like an insult. They're very good thinkers. And I've met most of them because I had a software company where they had to get stuff from me. I got to meet almost everyone from back then. Anymore, I don't know what they're doing much.
yeah,
But what you're doing, you're the first I said that. I wish it were astrology that you're doing it too, but you're doing it with the Torah and stuff like that. And that's the same difference, really. It
yeah,
doesn't matter. And I'm doing it with Dharma.
yeah.
Oh, that's what I was going to tell you. What my teacher taught me about astrology. He knew I was an astrologer, and he came and gave a special teaching at our center. I've had a Buddhist meditation center since the 1980s, where all the great lamas from Tibet, when they had nowhere to go in the 80s, they came to my center and centers like it. And so he came and gave a special teaching, which is really wonderful teaching, because they all know astrology, or at least how to use it. And what he said to me, he wanted me, and he taught me this. He said, I'll try to get his words exactly. He says, astrology is one of the limbs of the yoga, but it's not the root.
Yeah.
He said, astrology can, basically what he was saying is astrology can help us it's like rearranging the deck chairs on a Titanic. Astrology can help someone in this samsaric world get from one place to maybe a better place. Astrology can do that. It's like I used to race sailboats, so it's like sailing. Sailing, you can just turn your boat and go from here to there across the water. And it's the same way with astrology. Astrology can, and that's what I did with clients, is to help them have them accept what they have and then transform that into something more comfortable. I used to say it's like picking up a baseball and holding it really tight, too tight. First, you have to let go of the baseball, then you have to pick it up again loosely. So, anyway, that's what he said is astrology is one of the limbs of the yoga, but not the root. Dharma is the root. And
Dharma is the root.
Yeah, and you'd have the same thing with whatever you're doing. I used to study the Kabbalah years and years ago, but not very deeply, and I certainly didn't learn Hebrew or anything like that. But I was just interested in it, and I spent years puzzling about the Sephiroth and all that stuff. But I learned all of the Western occultism years ago. I had Aleister Crowley's. I had everything he ever did on microfiche. And I studied it.
Yeah.
I didn't get much out of it, but when I found Dharma, it was exactly perfect for me.
Right.
Anyway, so this is interesting to me.
When did you come into Dharma as that feeling that this is the perfect place where I need to be? When did that happen in your life?
I think it was when I began to, first of all, when I met Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, 1974, February 14th, I think, and I got to be a chauffeur and got the chance to talk to him. And he actually sat me down. He didn't tell me what he was doing and taught me how to do what's called shamatha, or zazen, it'd be something similar. And it was very, very powerful. But what he taught me was that up to then I thought of Dharma and Buddhism, especially Zen Buddhism, which I really liked, because I would try to sit zazen for all day, stuff like that. It's not something to talk about, which is what I had mostly done, which I'm talking about it now, but it's something to do. It never occurred to me that I could be a Dharma practitioner, or that I same thing as you're going into the Torah and stuff, or that I should, or especially, or that I wanted to. Getting that wanna stuff took a long time for me, but that's where I started it. And then when I met my Dharma teachers, Khenpo Kata Rinpoche is a great Lama, and he came to me literally in a dream. A friend of mine called me from Ann Arbor and says, "This is," because we used to go around from guru to guru to guru to guru. She says, "You got to come see this guy." And I was running Matrix software and something. I say, "I'm done with that. I'm working. I'm running the company. I'm not going to drop everything and come down to Ann Arbor and go sit at the feet of the guru." And he said, "Okay." And then a couple of days later, I had an incredible dream that I was driving to Ann Arbor to meet this radiant Oriental gentleman. And I woke up and I suddenly was sad inside that my life was such that things like that are not happening to me. I'm not jumping around and going, so I got my kids and my family, and we jumped in, and I called down there and woke the guy up, and he said, "No, the Rinpoche is leaving in a couple hours, 3 hours. It's too late." But we jumped in our car with our toothbrushes, literally drove like a bat out of hell about 3 hours, and got there just when he's leaving. And when we met him, everything changed. I was home. And
you were home.
I went around like in a dream for 2 or 3 days, but then sobered up and then got in line. And even when I first met him, I sort of said, "Well, I'm an astrologer." And he says, "I can see that you've never done harm with your astrology." That's all good. I said, "Couldn't I place out of Meditation 101 and get to some of the more interesting stuff?" He said, "No, you can't. When it comes to meditation, you're going to have to go to the end of the line and start at the beginning." And it took me, and we went, this was in the coldest night of the year. We had driven, and we'd driven 800 miles with our kids, and we had to scrape the frost off the thing even to see out. And we haven't even called ahead and said we're coming. We just showed up at his monastery because I had that kind of faith, right? And he was there. Right. And then we went down to a little motel. It had just one of those little infrared burners in the wall. And he taught us, you know what Tonglen is?
Not offhand, no, I've heard it.
Well, it's just a technique for exchanging yourself for others. And to do that, you're supposed to breathe in all the darkness in the world and then send out all of your light. Well, we were down in a motel freaking out, thinking, "Gee, that's what he told us to do," right?
Right.
It was a very hard decision, but we decided to go with him and to go to the end of the line meditation-wise. And that's the smartest thing I ever did. And I wasn't very smart about it, obviously. So anyway.
Something other than smart's going on.
Yeah. So I don't know where we want to take this other than, I'd like to learn more about your astrology. I'm not sure. I'm not very, very mathematical. I mean, other than I had to learn how to program and do trigonometry and stuff like that. But I never got a high school. I had to take Algebra 1, 3 semesters, and they just finally said, "Go, just go." But I got all A's in geometry. So I'm very visual.
I was the same way. I struggled through Algebra 1 and 2, but geometry I breezed through. I was in architecture. Right. Everything just made geometrical sense to me.
Exactly.
And then I went into architecture school briefly.
Oh, really?
And then Yeah, then I didn't complete any of those. I was always broken up into places I was. I lived in an orphanage. My childhood was very broken up. I lost my family, and I was 2 years in an orphanage. So I didn't have a lot of
Yeah.
stability when I was young.
Whoa.
But then it kind of led into the workplace. I did a lot of different jobs when I was younger. I couldn't make up my mind, but finally I was called to Tibet. I just had a calling to go, and that's really changed my life. When I stayed very analytical until something told me this is what you're supposed to do. This is where you're supposed to go, and it all perfectly aligned. And I went, and that was the most that my life seems like it was completely changed at that point.
But what
Like
did you do there?
it is. I went to all the places that, all the monasteries. I didn't do anything intentional. That was the thing. I went to these places and I was very analytical. I have felt like I absorbed a lot of energy. And when I came back to the United States, that's when it erupted. It's like my experience that I had there, I felt like I was a sponge, and I just absorbed up the field. Everything was completely alive, very different for me from what I had experienced before.
Were you trying to meditate? Or you doing any practice?
No, not intentionally. No. I went to
you went to Sami, right?
Yeah, I did go to Samye. That was probably the most I spent the most spiritually aware time there, because it was removed from everyone. And I there was an event that was going on there. They were installing a new Rinpoche, and they hadn't installed this. I forget what level of Rinpoche in this level in a while. So the BBC was there, and they were filming.
Did you stay there overnight?
Oh yeah. I stayed there for a few weeks in the Samye monastery.
Did you take a boat?
Oh yeah. I was on the boat on the other side. Went to the other side. Yeah, I was there.
And then ride a truck.
Yeah, they take a truck. You ride the boat. I feel like it took forever. I still have pictures of me in the boat with a bunch of nuns from the Ani Gompa that's up there too.
But you didn't climb to Chimpuk. You know Chimpuk, what that is? That's
the caves.
Yeah, the Guru Rinpoche. It's about a half a day or several hours climb on a horseback.
Yeah, we did that.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't use horses. We rode up. We rode up kind of the valley, and then you go up to. There used to be a village. I remember I walked the whole way we rode up as far as we could go.
Well, what year was this?
This was in 2000. I was there. That was 23 years ago, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, so for me it was 1997 or 1996.
97. Okay.
And
this is 4 years before I was there. Yeah.
If you get up near the caves, just under the caves, there's a nunnery. Was that the village you thought of?
It serves the caves.
Yeah.
No. There was a village that actually they told us that there was a village that was there, some ruins that had been vacated in the 1980s. So there were some ruins that I hung out in there for, and then we went up to the caves where the Ani Gompa is, and then I stayed. I didn't stay in the caves, but I met. That was the one. I totally had not thought about this in 23 years, but there was one fellow who's a younger monk, and he came out of the cave. He had not seen another person in a year. He had been in the cave for 12 months, and he came out, and then here we are filming him, and he got to see himself for the first time on camera on a film. We had brought a video camera experience, but his joy, his light. I remember I was like, I have never seen that in an American citizen. I've never seen that level of consciousness beaming from someone, and that those kind of events that I serendipitously experienced were my unplanned meditation, I suppose. Imprints. And when I got there, you used the word home, and I felt like I was at home, visiting home. I felt like this is where I've spent so many lives, and I was told, you don't get to spend this life here. You have to go back and live a different life, because you've lived so many lives as a monk on the mountaintop. You have to now go back down to the valley and do your other work in this life. And I was very disappointed in that response. But when I got back to the United States, the juxtaposition that I experienced that I had, once if you're a fish and you're swimming in a toxic pond all the time, you don't really know it's toxic. And then you go to a place like that that's so full of light and spirituality, you come back to that toxic pond, you know the difference. And that's what happened to me there. Yeah. Exactly. And that's how I had my awakening. Yeah. Is that level of awakening happened. So yeah.
No, that's very cool. Yeah, no, yeah, we went to many places, many caves, and we went to a place called Shadrach. It's the Crystal Cave. It's a Guru Rinpoche, one of the places that Guru Rinpoche first went to.
Yes, I believe I did so.
This would have been an all-day climb, though.
We were there for months. Yeah, I spent months there. So I can't remember all the names of all the places. Sometimes we would go spend a place for weeks, but we never went north of Namso. We stayed all the area of Lake Namso down south. So it was a very concentrated region. And I stayed most of the time in Lhasa. I had residence there briefly, and then also in Nepal. So I felt more like a tourist than but there was only like 40 or 50,000 Westerners that came there at that time. I don't know what it is now.
Right. No.
But yeah, but I was called there. I guess I wasn't quite on a spiritual path like I wanted to be at the time that I went, because that was around my Saturn return. And the Chinese government taunted me to go. That's really the only reason I went. I had been in a little bit of a fiery moment where I wrote a letter to the Chinese government and said, this is not, this happy smiling Tibetans that you are showing are not real. I was on some free Tibet kick at the time. And I had the Chinese official wrote me back and said, come see for yourself. And I had to say, there were a lot of people that were very smiley, happy people from Tibet under Chinese rule. So I went there and under that preface,
Right.
But what I came back with it was like I said, it was serendipitous. I wasn't really supposed to know my presupposed intent, what I'd planned for myself. So
well, that sounds cool.
Yeah. Well, thank you for listening. You brought up some memories I hadn't had in 23 years about that trip, and how important and impactful it was.
Well, we also went to the other side, to Eastern Tibet.
Okay.
Not to Lhasa, but almost into China. I mean, now China owns it all, supposedly, but so we share something like that, so that's pretty cool.
Did you spend any time in the Himalayas at all?
I mean, we were in Nepal and stuff like that, but I didn't go climbing.
Did you go to Everest, or you didn't go climbing? Okay.
No, we climbed to the Crystal Cave, which was like even our guide had never been there, and he was spent his whole life there. So it was very hard to get there, and it was just a little tiny cave, very, very high up, and you had to walk very, very carefully because you could just fall off. Anyway, so let's move back, if you don't mind. Let's go back to astrology a bit, and so this gives you, all that Tibetan stuff gives you a lot of strength. I mean, that's a good thing, right? What you got from
more awareness. I think cultural awareness of how deep astrology really goes, because one of the first questions I ran across when I came back was, did you learn any Tibetan Buddhist astrology? And I really didn't learn as much as I should have. I did find.
What did you learn? I know I wrote a whole book about 800-page book on Tibetan astrology, but I don't use it. No,
not much. I couldn't recall. That was, I don't use it. That's the thing, is I never really used it. I just remember I looked for all the similarities in Western astrology, but I can't recall much about.
No, it's more similar to Chinese astrology, but it's a combination of Chinese and Indian, right? It's called Kartsi from India and Jungsi from the Chinese. So, I learned all that, and I wrote a big book about it. But again, it's not. I use the stuff I was talking about earlier that I came up. Most of my stuff, what terma, tertons, treasure finders.
Tertons. No, I'm not sure. Not about this one.
No, in Tibet, tertans are people who find sacred scrolls and teachings, mostly from Guru Rinpoche, and either under, and but they also have what are called mind terma. These are teaching you how to go into the mind itself and find something rather than. And I'd like to tease some of the younger people that are, doing Greek, or Robert Schmidt. He eventually did that as well. Is that I'm not so interested in ancient languages. What I'm interested in is the ability to go into the mind itself and find, and a lot of the techniques that I discovered for myself, like, I don't know, local space, that's something I discovered, in interface, and a bunch of them that no one else, first of all, no one knows that, no one's ever come up and made me challenged me in a sense that I even understood that they understood it, right? Not enough to even talk about it. So I think that's the way it is. But mind terma, in 2004, I went to China with my teacher to a place called Wu Tai Shan. Wu Tai Shan is a five mountains in the form of a number 5 die, 4 mountains with one in the center. And this was the place, this is what my teacher taught us, that where the deity Manjushri first came as a youth, and from the top of his head poured the 84,000 dharmas of astrology. This is where astrology first entered our world system, according to the Chinese and according to my teacher and stuff like that. So we went there and did puja, went to the top of all the mountains and did puja on each one of them, and stayed for about a week or so. And when I came back, sounds a little bit like what you said, when I came back, all this stuff began to pour out of me. So we share that. So they're kind of similar trajectories that we are, have been.
It's just more proof of astrology right there.
Well, definitely. Well, this was just...
Yeah.
So what astrologers, I mean, I'm talking to you because someone suggested I should, and then I'm really getting old, and I've had a lot of health trouble, so I'm not going to live forever. What other people should I talk to in the world of astrology now? So I'm not much in touch with the younger ones. Some of them I'm in touch with, but is there anyone that you think I should talk to?
I have you talked to Brett Joseph? Gemini Brett?
Nope, never heard of him.
He's Gemini Brett. He's pretty popular fellow, but he thinks a lot like we do. He's not. I think he started out as an astronomer and then became an astrologer. He came that way, and he learned the wisdom of the stars, and now he's just he teaches astrology at night. He takes people out and shows them how to coordinate with the stars. He wants people to feel the heavens, So just that gives you just a taste of who he is, and he's my age. So he's in California. Actually, we're going to be hosting him here on the eclipse, because we're in the eclipse path of totality here.
Oh, really?
He's coming here on April 8th to do. We're going to have that weekend, and he's going to do a talk on the astronomical aspects of what we're seeing. We're going to have some nighttime stuff, big event. So
what about people that are into esoteric astrology? What I would call, well, Dharma astrology is pretty esoteric astrology, but I can't seem to find any younger people. Maybe I should meet. Certainly, I know the astronomy and how to program all that. So I could probably get something from that. But what I'm really interested in is the process of what we call initiation, empowerment. In my view, my view of astrology, I'll try to be really brief, but it's that 500 years ago, Copernicus pointed out to everyone that everything doesn't revolve around us. That we in fact revolve around the sun. And astrologers, for whatever reason, I'm sure there's a good history of it, but I don't know it much. Astronomers didn't take to it. I mean, astrologers didn't take it. Astronomers walked away with the heliocentric chart and the geocentric chart.
Right.
And they're doing really well. I mean, the two oldest academic disciplines are what? Botany and astronomy. But astrologers are still struggling to live. So somewhere they missed the boat. I think that there was an empowerment that went along with understanding the value of the heliocentric that astrologers didn't want to take and didn't take and still haven't received. And so that's my view of that, is that and certainly I was empowered myself through it, but it was a major empowerment. I mean, I literally transmigrated from geocentric to heliocentric, which was a big deal in the sense that I changed my whole way of seeing myself. So I'm wondering, are there any people that you know in astrology that are interested in empowerment or that know Dharma, but I don't really need to learn Dharma? I guess I'm kind of casting about to find it. Is there anyone else I should talk to?
I know of a few, and they're kind of in a group. There's the Astrology Hub crew. Are you familiar with Amanda Poo Walsh?
I've been on her thing two or three times, it being interviewed. Yeah, she's not really an astrologer. She's a producer.
No, she's not. She's a wonderful open spirit, though. She's really open to hear anything. She wants to know it all,
She's
a dear friend of ours.
Oh, well, she's a good interviewer. One of the best I've ever seen. Yeah. Oh no, and I think I was interviewed by her on her Astrology Hub. I can't remember. It's 2 or 3 times, and they loved it. But she's not an astrologer per se.
Well, she's got several people in her group. I'm trying to remember who she's connected with, but she has a network of people that are really more focused on the esoteric side and the Dharma, the spiritual aspects of astrology. I can't think of anybody that combines the heliocentric. I'm not expecting. That would be like too much. But I see the net you're casting, and I can make a general list. We know so many of the more up and coming astrologers, and then our peers that are in my age group in the 50s. That are so and then a lot of this younger group, I want to cast a larger net to the 20 somethings and the 30 somethings a little bit too, to make sure everyone's kind of plugged in, that there's a need to be spiritually aware of this. When we went to India, we did an event in India in 2018. Lot of astrologers there, more than 100 Western astrologers were there, and we had one person there who was an atheist astrologer, and I could not quite fathom how you can be an atheist and be an astrologer at the same time. Right. And he was just convinced we were all full of ourselves, that he was spiritual. And I say, wait a minute, we can't have if that connects to people, that's fine. But we need to make sure that we focus on the spiritual aspects of the astrological experience, not just keeping it into reading charts. But that's why Shannon and I are very focused on making sure that our astrology always involves an initiation of some kind. I love that when you said that. It's like we're always focused on initiate. Our school starts out with the first module is called initiation, and it's not about astrology. It's about initiation into your own conscious before we even talk about astrology. So that's where we're coming from.
No, I get that.
But people that are in that vein.
Yeah, but I have always said, but no one listens to this, is that what astrologers most need is to learn to use their mind correctly, to meditate, to be able to. They assume that everyone, just as they come out of the box, so to speak, the mind is good to go, but it's just not the case. The case is that the mind admits of training and needs it, but especially in astrologers. I mean, I've known, I think, 40 or 50,000 customers. So I met a lot of them, right? Or too many of them, and I had one of the largest libraries in the world of astrology. And I probably read too much of that. Most of that was crap. I've placed that in the University of Illinois library permanent collection now. I don't have it anymore. Right. And I've done that with all my. I'm also, I don't know what you know, but I'm an archivist of popular culture.
Yeah. Oh, you shared that before. I remember that you gave Iggy Pop his name too.
Well, that too. But I was talking here about the largest music database in the world I created. It's still, it's worth, I don't know how much it's worth now. I don't know it.
It's amazing.
And one of the two largest film databases and the largest rock and roll poster database. I did give Iggy Pop its name. It was just.
I knew you were deeply connected into the culture, the scene of that. Yeah.
So I was trying to think, where was I getting? I
had mentioned initiation.
Oh yeah. Well, initiation. My first teacher was a Rosicrucian teacher that taught me Western Rosicrucianism. Used to say, initiate, in it I ate. Used to take words apart and spell them.
Yeah.
And so that it's getting in there and eating of it, which is what you're telling me about with the Torah and stuff. And that makes all the difference. One has to actually do that. One has to actually get in the mind and become familiar. In this case, it would be whatever you're trying to become familiar with, but that's so absolutely necessary. So I'm just wondering, I think I'm fairly unusual in the sense that I don't think many people have studied astrology either as long or all the different kinds of them. But mostly I'm a mystical, spiritual person. So when you say that you want to teach your folks about initiation, I'm 100% with you. I believe that every astrological technique is kind of like a freeze-dried thing. You just add awareness. You can't just pick up a technique and use it with impunity. You have to be empowered. Certainly in Tibetan, you know this from empowerments and stuff. One has to be empowered. They have to have. You probably had many empowerments, right, when you were in Tibet, or some.
I didn't call. I don't know if I called it that. I'm not familiar with that as a.
Well, if they give. Word. Well, if they offer an empowerment for someone like Chenrezig or.
Okay.
So then they have different parts to them. One of them is what's called the lung, which means that it has to be read to you into your mind. And another thing you have to have is you have to be instructed on how to do it. And of course, the hard part is you actually have to do it. And then do it until you realize something from it. So it's just, so maybe when you talk about, I'm not sure how do you empower your students? I mean, how do they get initiated?
Well, in our layout, what we focus on first is just the exploration of consciousness itself, where it is, what we think of it.
Where is it?
Well, I don't mean where. I mean where it is on a level of unified consciousness, and how it is ununified. So I guess my point is, I focus a lot on conscious science. I bring in a lot of Torah teachings and Dharma teachings. I say Dharma. I should say Buddhist influence teachings, not specifically towards the Dharma, but I bring in a lot of that influence into the sciences, where conscious is in sciences, talking specifically about AI consciousness. What is artificial? What does it mean to be something? Are we actually evolving into a next level of consciousness? Is this a part of a spiritual experience of just being temporarily embodied in organic form, becoming something in the next phase of material form? Our human consciousness is going to be absorbed by matter on another level. What does that mean? As human beings and as what evolves. Yeah, so that's initiation into just a wide variety of exploration of conscious ideas before we even talk about patterning. And then we move into patterning. What does that look? Our next section is on evolution, from the seed consciousness of the divine being one mind. How does it first split into two? How does it divide and then create a pattern that we know as astrology, or that we can bring in as a fundamental structure of the universe? And then how does that create our spiritual experiences? How does that create this life that we think we're having, that we're dreaming into? How does it manifest the dream? Yeah,
I hear you. I mean,
so that's kind of our vision. Yeah.
So have you done? I've done quite a bit with AI graphics. Do you do do you know what Midjourney is?
Yeah, I don't use it much, but yeah, I know what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I've done a lot.
That's great that you use that.
10 or 15,000 of those. Well, I use it. I use it not as art. I use it as illustration. I have a blog.
Okay.
I have a blog that I have to illustrate. I've done it since 2007 on Facebook, and almost
Okay.
all the images that I use, I create on Midjourney. And I also use Chat GPT is incredibly powerful, as you probably know, right? I mean, you can.
Yeah, I've been playing with it a little bit. What have you been doing with Chat GPT?
Mostly just asking it questions. Simply, some of it's just doing the algebra that I never learned. It's great at showing me how to do things and doing them for me. But I understand from some folks that I know who use it to write programs and got rid of a whole staff, and that apparently you can get like you can pass the bar exam and get into 10% of the top.
Whoa!
Just by using that. So I think that well, I think AI is incredible. It reminds me of when the internet first came. I mean, I was, you know, I had email in 1979, and I was, and before the World Wide Web, I had what's called gopher sites of music and film, and CompuServe used my stuff, and then all these people.
I had a BBS. I had a BBS in 1982, so I was up there early on in the computer world before it kind of became the thing in the 90s. But so I'm familiar with right after you were working with in 79 and came into the computer world.
Well, I worked with Microsoft. I ran 110 New Age forums, which is a lot.
Wow.
And this is when they had. Well, it didn't last a long time because this is when, I forget the name of it, Microsoft had this whole approach, which they dumped after a couple of years. But I've worked with almost, you know, like Netflix. I provided Netflix with all their movie data for the first 2 or 3 years, because they,
oh my gosh,
until they had the money to do it themselves. So, so you could, you know,
that's incredible.
You know, if you get into that kind of stuff, I've worked with almost anyone, you know, all the big bookstores, Barnes and Noble, Borders, they all use my data from all music, you know, and yeah, that was a whole, you know, I had 150 full-time employees and almost 700 freelance writers working for me. So that's something I don't want to do again, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I had no idea. Wow, that's incredible.
That took a lot of attention. So anyway, okay, so I hear what you're saying about how you're introducing people.
Right.
Yeah, I guess that I think I mentioned that. I think of some of the techniques that I've developed, like local space, and I wrote a book called Astrology of the Heart. It's basically about the Saturn return, which I'm thoroughly schooled in. I had a Rosicrucian teacher who taught me about the Saturn return before I had my Saturn return, so that I went through my first Saturn return with kind of my eyes open. I was initiated in that. So I wrote a whole book about that has a lot of my journals and stuff in it.
Wow.
From that. So I'm totally interested in helping people to become empowered and to be able to use techniques in an empowered sense instead of just using them without really knowing what they are or what they mean. So, you know, I had a little school of astrology for a while, but you know, the stuff I teach, no one could really learn. So anyway, I'm trying to think, where are we now? I think I found out a lot of where you're at, in the sense that you seem to be at a very, very good place.
Well, thanks. Yeah. Well, I'm learning more about what you've done. I had no idea that I knew that you had done the archival work, but I didn't know that it had evolved into another thing where you had a large organization company that you were working with. That's incredible. That I knew you would continue to amaze me. I think it's That must be I have a Cancer Mars. You have Aries Mars, right?
I do.
Yeah, I think it's like you've done a lot of Aries things that yeah, that's incredible. But one of the things I was going to mention is I do feel that something you just said has a lot of value, that you were able to read or connect with your Saturn return before you went through it, and you went through it consciously, knowing you were going through it. And I was like, how valuable would that be to so many people? Because I thought the same thing about my own life. My Saturn return was so devastating, and if I had just known more about it, that's what really brought me into astrology, was my Saturn return. And
Right.
if I had known just even a little bit more before that, where I could have been, and documented it with my own spiritual journey of, how devastating it kind of was, but how necessary it kind of was. And I want to reach more people that are into AI, into in their younger years, in their 20s, and even in their teens, to catch them up to where they can be spiritually as they go through their life process. I think that's really, it's important to me. It's like, I'm not out trying to create a school of astrology for more astrologers. I think we have plenty of astrologers right now. Personally, I want to teach astrology as a living practice for daily life. That's what I'm looking at wanting to do. And for me, it's fun because it permeates all parts of life. It permeates the heady parts of life, the mental. It can fill my mental structure all day long, and it speaks to the natural truth of everything. It speaks to the truth of particles and planets. It speaks to the truth of consciousness wherever it is. And that's what I want to share. I want to preach it to other people. Honestly, this is where I have to overcome my being on stage. It's like, all right, you're just going to go up there and preach whatever comes out about how valuable it really is, and then show them amazing things about it. And that's sort of where I approach astrology. I don't want to make more astrologers. I want to teach people that it is a living force.
It's starting to sound a lot like a religion.
I think it should be, personally.
Yeah, no, it's fine by me. No, astrology, it's just as my teacher said, one of the
it's at the heart of every religion, Michael. It is at the heart of every religion. Astrology is, Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, certainly in Tibet, they all use astrology. In fact, some of the astrology was because they had to leave Tibet. Some of the astrologers were dying out. So I brought one of them over to this country, and he lived with us for a while. And I brought another astrologer from Bhutan, who was a tremendously brilliant. He became the Minister of Culture for Bhutan, and we taught him how to use Macintosh graphics. He was a great artist. In fact, his art, which I donated to the Rubin Museum in New York, about 500 pieces. But anyway, these guys were dying out. They had certain tables that weren't extended. They reached the end of the extension. And so that we would, and this is some of the stuff I took to Tibet and gave to the Karmapa, some of the extension, some of the mathematics that went with it. So anyway, yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of different stuff. I've become skilled in a bunch of different fields, not just in not just in astrology, but I'm a really good photographer, and I'm pretty well known for what I do, what's called focus stacking, taking 100 images and compiling them into a single image where everything is in focus, so there's no point of focus, so your mind is free to look around because there's nothing subconsciously drawing you to one point. So I kind of pioneered some of that, and I'm pretty well known among, digital photographers. I specialize in lenses, and what are called apochromatic lenses that are very, very perfect. I must have like 100 of them.
Right.
So I still do that. I just did about 2,100 photos of someone in our area who's doing. I also designed the logo for Eden Foods and became trained in macrobiotics early on. And so what I just did was, we're trying to do what's called hugel culture. Do you know what that is? Hugel mounds. It's a way of
I'm
gardening.
not sure. No.
With different
Okay.
layers of nutrients. So that what I did was take all these different, working with a geologist who has all these different soil additives and photographing them granularly with like 50 photos to make one, so that if you look at it, you can really see what the soil looks like. I just finished that,
Okay.
and just doing that as just as fun. Because he's giving me,
That's amazing.
He's giving me all kinds of soil and stuff for free. I mean, it's hard to find good organic soil because a lot of it's just bullshit. And so he is really trained. So I've been doing that just these days. But yeah, it's any people that you want to send me or introduce me to would even be better, that you think that they would like to meet me, and that maybe I would learn. And like, that's why you said you were going to bring another guy. If you want to do this again sometime, bring anyone you want. But I didn't. I didn't want to have to be dealing with two different people at once, because I'm very much don't do well in that, because each person is different. And so that what you say to one person, you don't necessarily say. Some of the stuff I've said to you, I wouldn't say in a group. Right. That idea. Gotcha. So I wanted to have a chance to meet you, but if you think I should meet someone like that, or have any interest in doing it again, I'm happy to do that. I'm happy. If I don't know the answer to something, I just apologize. I don't know. I just know just a certain amount of stuff, right? But what I know pretty well.
Yeah, and what you have a base for, we didn't even touch on a whole other level of work that I'm working on that I would love to just get your opinion on. And compare notes. I'm working with the electromagnetic spectrum. I'm showing that the Fibonacci sequence can be shown and how it perfectly aligns with the astrological basically geometries. So I'm looking at that at a scientific level, and we didn't even talk about it. I have a whole slew of mathematics behind it, very simple, that you might take a look at and just say, hey, this is good, or this is, this doesn't work. But
I don't know. I'm not a mathematician. I mean,
I'm not much of one either. That's why it's very simple to even look at and identify some of these things. And you have a keen eye for that, I think. But on another level, it's just like, I would like to ask just some other questions. I feel like this was just a reintroduction, since we hadn't spoken in a year, I guess that's been.
Well, we never really spoke. I mean, we never really.
Yeah, not really.
No, because I had very little idea of what you're about. And I have a much better idea. It's great. I think it's going to be an uphill climb, I bet, to try to initiate people into that. But if you can get people to do what you're doing with the Torah, that's the hard part. That's what Dharma for me is all about, is how do we get people out of their heads so that they're not just conceptualizing and thinking that that's actual experience, and how do we get them to ground their experience in physical put the money where their mouth is, right? How do they go and become initiated? So you might like the book. You've seen my website, right? Spirit Grooves, or not?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think it's been a while, but yeah, I have seen it.
Well, on that spiritgrooves.net, on there is a book called Astrology of the Heart. And in fact, Robert Schmidt published that book. And mostly he was just publishing Greek stuff and stuff like that, but he published that first just because he thought it was important. But anyway, it's all about the Saturn return. It's all journal entries. A lot of it's, as I grew up, a lot of it's pretty rough, because I'm not going to try to pretty up what I said stupid stuff and learn, but it might interest you if you like the Saturn. The Saturn return, we could have a lot more to discuss about that, because the whole thing is like my teacher, but my Rosicrucian teacher, who was a Scotsman from Scotland, and he was a traveling initiator for a Rosicrucian group. And I knew him just before he died, and when he died, I had to take care of his things and bury him and design a tombstone for him. And he used to say to me, which you might get a kick out of also, he says, Michael, first of all, I'm a good talker, but around him, I never talked. I would spend a whole day with him, and I would go home and almost vomit because I was so tired, so exhausted. And he would say stuff like this. He'd say, Michael, imagine yourself standing at the center of the sun. Then he would growl, which I won't imitate. So that's hot stuff. And sure enough, years later, that's exactly what I did when I got into heliocentrics, right? I imagined myself standing at, but he said, he would say, someday you're going to respond to what I'm putting into you. But he actually said that, right? He said that many times, that I was just going to wake up and understand what he's programming or kind of sticking in.
But these are seeds.
Yeah, exactly.
These are seeds that were laid dormant they will lay dormant until the right elements come to wake them. That's
exactly
beautiful.
So that, but he would say that we spend the first 30 years of our life, our first Saturn return, trying to form our body, trying to have, in a sense, we spend the second 30 years, Saturn, repairing the damage we made being born. He felt that we were born, that there's a spiritual birth that happens around 30 years, a Saturn return, and that we begin to emerge from our body, not at the end of life, but right then. We start to leave the body once the body has reached what we would call the prime of life. It's not going to grow anymore, so we begin to withdraw. We're just not aware of it, and that those people who become aware of it, mostly Christians, we'll talk about being born again, but that's really doesn't belong to them. That's something belongs to all of us, that we all start to leave our body right in the middle. It's almost like a procession up to presenting ourselves. And then I wrote a poem a long time ago. It said, I can't even remember what it said. I guess I can't remember. I can't remember it, but anyway, it was about this idea of when we begin to withdraw. Helping people learning how to get out of the body without, out of body projections, which are just totally wrong. That you don't leave the body till you have a body finished to leave, and it's what the esoterics call not rounding the nadir. If you start to leave the body before the body's finished, then you're just missing what it is you need in order to talk about it. You have nothing to talk about if you don't live it. And so, and then he said the third 30 years, we actually become, which I'm in, part of the creator. We begin to actually physically, we actually can create life, and we can embed seeds, I guess you call them. So that whole initiation of the Saturn returns, I think Grant Lewis' book, Astrology for the Millions, it's maybe the first book that used that phrase and becomes kind of trite, but it's one of the great astrology books, and I had like 10,000 of them. And it was one of the few books that really, really was worthwhile. And I'm pretty sophisticated about what, with the stuff that my feelings, the stuff that I find to be true. Anyway, this astrology of, the astrology of the heart. I mean, our whole center here is called the Heart Center. That it was since 1972, when I had like a Kriya, when I suddenly realized that it was a communion center. That means that, anyway, it's too much to get into it here, but it's you might like that book. I mean, it's a little embarrassing for me. No, but it's not embarrassing if you're trying to understand
truthful
the chakras. It's a book about Saturn and the chakras, and people don't know what the chakras are. They're nothing to do. But yes, we can see points within our body to think about, but chakras are whole realms of being that we wander in, lives that we live, moving from chakra to chakra to chakra. Anyway, I don't want to make you take too long. I think that we should probably wrap this up. But
No, it's fine. Yeah,
it's been fun. And if you have other people,
yeah,
or people that want to quiz me, I love being asked questions.
sure.
And I just only know the stuff I know about, but I'm pretty detailed about what I do know. But how to explain this?
Well,
I could handle all recorded music, which are like 5 million parts now, but all recorded film. Not many people have a tolerance for tedium that I've had.
Exactly.
And not take it as tedium, but take it a step at a time, an album at a time. That's unusual. But the whole idea of boredom is something I write about a lot now, because boredom is just, if you've ever read the Tibetan Book of the Dead, then you know something enough about the bardos to know that in the bardo, in the Churni bardo, that's kind of the second one after you die, that we discovered a very, very, very bright light. It is so bright that we can't bear to look at it. And that instead of embracing it or going toward the light, we try to find our way back into samsara, the shadows, and hide. Well, that light is right with us now. We just are so habituated to samsara, which I say samsara, that's what I talk to myself about it, that we can't, and being entertained. One of the big initiations for me was realizing my incredible ability to be busy and to get things done, and and when I'm not busy working, then I'm entertaining myself, or was, with everything that I can. That's all a way of avoiding this light. And that what we call boredom is just the gateway to the light. That if we can learn to master boredom, our mind is going to open up so that we can more embrace the light. I think people are thinking we're going to die and then we're going to just have a wonderful time in the bardos, and that's not the case. It's going to be very, very, very serious, very, very difficult. So, because we're not prepared. So anyway, a lot of my time now is spent writing about trying to help people prepare for after death experience. What are we going to have to work with? So anyway, some other time we could talk, or if you wanted to bring that other person time, we could do it.
That what you just said there was what I needed to hear today.
Tell me what, which part?
All of it. Our minds work a lot alike. Our minds work a lot alike, and it's like, why am I rushing to Bardo in my mind? Why am I always too far ahead of the game in my mind? I want to know where it all ends, and I'm not taking the time in myself, or I'm not slowing my time field down enough to focus on what's here right now. I need to be more in a meditative mind in my daily life.
How are you going to prepare for the Bardo? That's the thing. In fact, you can just go to Facebook and scroll down a couple blogs, and I'm talking just about this. And no one's listening. Because, but in 2019,
but that's the most important message.
Well, in 2019, I had a major stroke. In a moment.
Yeah, I remember.
Have you read about that?
I remember talking about it. Yeah.
Oh, we talked about it. Okay, then we did then. So.
Well, I think Michael told me about it.
Yeah. Well, the thing about it is that even though I was in the hospital being carted around, what happened was that what I call myself or my ego, that everything that my history was completely wiped out. And instead was this incredible, brilliant light that was always there, had always been there, but it was too bright for me to even think about looking at it. And here's the caveat, and here's the thing that's going to be hard for you to understand, or for anyone to understand, is that what we're calling the brilliant light, the light of the Bardo, is not really a light. That's just a convenience. What it is our inability to part with or give up the shadow and the cover of samsara, which are all the things that we never got right. And my inability to get under cover caused me to have to go through, it took weeks for my ego or myself to reanimate, to kind of get back to closure. During that time, I was like a piece of fat in a frying pan. I was in incredible pain because I had no choice but to be in that light. I still didn't look at it, but I could not find my history. I could not find any closure or any place for me to retire to, and just to be entertained, to be what I'm used to, is constantly entertaining myself and never looking at the light. So that left an indelible impression on me that what I thought about after death and entering the Bardo was not realistic at all, that we're not ready. We're not ready to do that. We're going to have to get ready. And to do that, we're going to have to start coming to terms with boredom, or whatever we want to use, whatever we don't like, whatever we avoid. Right. So if that can mean something to you, then that's a truth that you're going to have to look at sooner or later, according to me.
It's already permeating.
Really?
I feel that truth already. Yeah.
Yeah, but what are you going to do? What can you do about it? I mean, I'm not asking.
Well, no, I'm asking myself. For me, it's like I have to be true to my practice, what I say I'm about, and a lot of times I'm not.
No, but you've done the hardest thing. Is you've taken I wrote a wonderful poem. I should send it to you, called "The Point of No Return." You've passed the point of no return. You're not going to return. You're not a returner.
Right.
And that's something that's really hard won. I don't recall anyone ever said that too. You've gone beyond the point of no return, which is a blessing. But that doesn't mean it's going to be simple. It's going to be just as tough as it always has been.
Yeah.
So
it's like we ask for it, though.
Well, we desire it, right? We need it more than anything, right?
Yeah, and ultimately we designed it. I think I think what it's all leads to.
And you have a partner, so that's good. I mean, I've been married 52 years, so that's important too, to be able to survive that. Marriage is not trivial.
Right. We're in our 7th year together. So it helps that we're both astrologers and both have she went to school at Naropa in Boulder. So she has a Buddhist background, and so we have those things we share, and we also have the Christian upbringing earlier in life. So it's like we're aligned where we're supposed to be, and I'm like, I thank the heavens for that all the time too. So 7 years, and I feel like it's only going to get easier, hopefully.
I don't think it gets easier, but it gets easier in one way, looking at it. But how could it get easier? I mean,
I think it comes to me being in my own personal practice. I think in holding my own, I think is going to help. I have my mind does a lot of things, and it's like as long as I can remember to go back to my practice, whether it's a Buddhist practice, whether it's a Torah practice, that's it. I've got to find that center, be in this now. One of the first things you said early on today. That's it. That's really the trick. It's simple. We make it more challenging.
Well, I
So,
think that the trick, if there's a trick, is allowing yourself to rest in the present moment. That if you can continue to focus on that, or if one can, that's certainly what I do, is learning to not be in the future and not being in the past and not monkeying with the present, but just allow myself to rest. That will bring clarity. Not at first, but because you have to fight the boredom thing of what am I doing? Nothing. Well, doing nothing is really something, right? That's what
that's really something.
Yeah.
You can move mountains when you're doing nothing if you know how to do it right.
Exactly. So anyway, any other thoughts, or I'm good.
Not at the moment. I feel like I just received a blessing and a download there the last few minutes. And I'm going to take that with me the rest of the day. And I would like to come back and ask you a few more questions about maybe some heady things, analytical things. But
yeah, anything.
And thank you.
Yeah, whatever you want.
Very much.
Or bring your friends and we talk.
Let's chat. Okay. Yeah.
But I suggest you do go to the Facebook thing and go back a time or two.
I will. Yeah.
And then some of those are just about what we're talking about that you said that you responded to. So, because that's my message, basically, is to learn to relax, which is hard for me because I'm wound tighter than a drum. So.
Well, you're so busy. I don't know where you find time to relax with all that you've done.
Well, what are they?
It seems like you have.
Well, I've gotten really good at a whole number of fields. I forget what the word is for that, but got bit of an expert on a number of fields.
Polymath.
It's a polymath.
Kind of a polymath.
I'm a total polymath in the sense that.
Yeah.
So, but where does that get me?
Exactly.
What it got me is that I have to back off. That I have to stop being the busiest person in the world, one of them, and stop flirting with tedium and just rest. So I'm working on it. I work on it every single day. So
you're working hard on that resting part.
It's very hard because it's impossible. Anyway,
I get it. Well, I appreciate the chat today, Michael. Thank you very much.
Me too.
And we'll chat again. And if I could get a recording of that, that'd be great too.
I'll send it to you. Okay.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. Okay.
Bye-bye.
See you later. Okay. Bye-bye.